In 1978, there were 43 scheduled passenger airlines in the U.S. Today, due to mergers and bankruptcies, there are only 11 major carriers. That's a lot of airlines that have disappeared. We're about to uncover the stories of 23 of these vanished giants. Some you might remember, others might surprise you, but all of them played a part in shaping America's aviation landscape. Ready for takeoff? From Pan Am's globe-trotting adventures to Braniff's Technicolor planes, these airlines weren't just transportation, they were experiences. We'll explore the innovation of People Express, the first low-cost airline to go international, and the luxury of Midwest Express, where every seat was first class. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a trip down memory lane. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. It helps our channel fly high. Pan Am, the pioneer of international air travel. Speaking of globe-trotting adventures, let's talk about the granddaddy of international air travel, Pan American World Airways. Pan Am wasn't just an airline, it was America's unofficial flag carrier, bringing the stars and stripes to every corner of the globe. Founded in 1927 by two Air Force majors, talk about aiming high, Pan Am started small with mail runs between Florida and Cuba. But under the leadership of Juan Trippe, it quickly spread its wings. By 1930, Pan Am was zipping all over Central and South America, using flying boats called clippers. These weren't your average puddle jumpers. They could land on water, perfect for destinations without runways. Pan Am's innovations didn't stop there. They pioneered air traffic control, weather forecasting, and even encouraged Americans to fly to Cuba for rum during Prohibition. Now that's what I call creative marketing, TWA, from transcontinental to transoceanic. Speaking of flying high, let's talk about an airline that soared to new heights, TWA. Trans World Airlines wasn't just any old carrier, it was the playground of eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes. Ever wonder what happens when you mix planes with Hollywood glamour? Well, TWA was the answer. Hughes's influence turned TWA into a powerhouse. In 1953, they became the first to offer non-stop coast-to-coast service. Talk about a long flight without a bathroom break, but TWA wasn't done impressing us. In 1961, they introduced the first in-flight movies. Imagine the excitement of watching a tiny screen while munching on airplane peanuts. TWA's transatlantic routes were the stuff of legend. Their New York to Paris flight in 1946 kicked off a new era of international travel. Sadly, all good things come to an end. In 2001, TWA merged with American Airlines, becoming another chapter in aviation history. But hey, at least we still have those tiny pretzels, right? Braniff, the airline that flew in Technicolor. Speaking of Technicolor planes, let's talk about Braniff International, the airline that turned the skies into a flying rainbow. Ever wonder what would happen if Willy Wonka designed an airline? Well, Braniff was pretty close. Their jets were painted in every color imaginable, from glossy purple to pastel blue. It was like a bag of Skittles took flight. But Braniff wasn't just about pretty colors. They hired famous designers like Halston and Emilio Pucci to create their uniforms and interiors. They even got Alexander Calder to hand paint a Douglas DC-8. Talk about a flying art gallery. Unfortunately, all this flair came at a cost. Braniff's extravagant spending led to financial troubles, and they abruptly ceased operations in 1982. But like a phoenix trying to rise from the ashes, if phoenixes wore neon, there were two attempts to revive Braniff. Spoiler alert, neither worked out. I guess you can't keep a good airline down, but you can keep a colorful one grounded. National Airlines, Florida's flying ambassador. While Braniff painted the skies with Technicolor flair, another airline was busy turning Florida into America's playground. Enter National Airlines, the Sunshine State's flying ambassador. Ever wonder how Florida became the go-to vacation spot for snowbirds and spring breakers alike? Well, you can thank National for that. This airline wasn't just about getting people to Florida, it was about selling the Florida dream. And boy, did they know how to sell it. In 1971, they launched their infamous Fly Me campaign. Picture this, a smiling stewardess saying, "I'm Judy, fly me." Talk about subtle, right? The National Organization for Women wasn't amused, but the campaign sure got attention. National's success caught the eye of Pan Am, who wanted a piece of that domestic pie. In 1980, they merged, hoping for a match made in aviation heaven. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The merger turned out to be more of a bumpy ride than a smooth landing for Pan Am. Eastern Airlines, the wings of the eastern seaboard. While some airlines painted the skies with rainbows, Eastern Airlines ruled the East Coast with an iron fist and a silver fleet. Ever wonder who connected New York to Florida before spring break was cool? That was Eastern's turf. But this airline story isn't just about beach trips and business travel. It's a tale of war heroes, mouse ears, and labor disputes that would make your office spats look like a picnic. Enter Eddie Rickenbacker, World War I flying ace and Medal of Honor recipient. In 1938, he bought Eastern for a cool $3.5 million and chump change for an airline these days. But back then, it was like buying a small country. Under Eddie's watch, Eastern grew faster than a teenager in a growth spurt, introducing fancy new planes like the Douglas DC-3. They even started hourly shuttle flights between New York, Boston, and DC. No reservations needed. If the plane was full, they'd just roll out another one. Talk about service. But Eastern's real claim to fame? Becoming the official airline of Disney World. Imagine Mickey Mouse as your co-pilot. Sadly, not all fairy tales have happy endings. Labor disputes and financial troubles hit Eastern hard. In 1989, the whole crew went on strike, and by 1991, Eastern had flown its last flight. The wings of the Eastern seaboard had been clipped for good. Continental, from modest beginnings to global player. While Eastern Airlines ruled the Eastern seaboard, another airline was quietly building an empire in the Southwest. Continental Airlines started small in 1934, but it had big dreams. Founded by Robert F. Six as Varney Speedlines, it began with just a handful of routes in the dusty Southwest. But Six wasn't content with being a small-time player. He had a vision of Continental spanning the globe. As the decades rolled by, Continental grew from a regional puddle jumper to a major international carrier. They introduced fancy new jets, like the Boeing 707 and even the massive 747. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The airline hit some turbulence in the 1980s, going bankrupt and facing labor disputes. Talk about a bumpy ride, but Continental wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. They bounced back in the 1990s, introducing their swanky business-first service. It was like first class, but for suits on a budget. In 2010, Continental made its final move, merging with United to create an aviation behemoth. Not bad for an airline that started with a few dusty desert routes. Northeast Airlines, the Yellowbirds of New England. While some airlines painted the skies with vibrant colors, others took a more mellow approach. Remember Northeast Airlines? If not, don't worry. You're not alone. This little airline made a big splash in New England with its distinctive yellow planes. Imagine a flock of giant canaries soaring through the sky. That's right, Northeast branded its fleet as Yellowbirds in 1966, giving their planes a sunny makeover. But Northeast wasn't just about looks. They were pioneers in their own right, becoming the first to fly the Boeing 727, 200 in 1967. Talk about being ahead of the curve. Despite their innovation, Northeast struggled to keep up with the big boys. In 1971, they were described as the runt of the trunks. Ouch. Eventually, Delta Airlines swooped in and merged with Northeast in 1972. It was like the high school jock asking the band geek to prom. Unexpected, but it worked out pretty well for both parties. Northwest, connecting America to Asia. While some airlines were painting the skies yellow, others were setting their sights on the Far East. Enter Northwest Airlines, the carrier that turned the Pacific into its playground. Ever wonder how Americans got their sushi fix before California rolls were a thing? Northwest had a big part to play in that cultural exchange. Back in the day, Northwest was known as Northwest Orient. Sounds exotic, doesn't it? They weren't kidding around with that name. From their hub in Tokyo, they flew to places that sounded like fantasy destinations to most Americans: Manila, Bangkok, Taipei. It was like they had a monopoly on adventure, but Northwest wasn't content with just Asia. They decided to go big or go home, becoming the world's largest operator of the 747. That's right, they were the kings of the jumbo jet. And in 1986, they made history by launching the first non-stop flight from America to China. Beijing, here we come. Western Airlines, the only way to fly. While some airlines were painting the skies with vibrant colors, Western Airlines took a different approach. They decided the only way to fly was with a big red W. Picture this. It's the 1970s and you're strolling through the airport. Suddenly you spot a plane with a massive red W fused into a red stripe running along its white body. That's Western Airlines for you folks. Western wasn't just about looks though. They had a bird mascot named Wally who would chirp, "It's the only way to fly." Talk about a catchy slogan. But Wally wasn't their only claim to fame. Western introduced jet services with fancy new planes, like Boeing, 707 and 727. They even called their DC-10s spaceships. I guess airplane just wasn't cool enough anymore. Despite their charm, Western couldn't fly solo forever. In 1987, they merged with Delta Airlines, leaving behind a legacy of quirky ads and that unforgettable red WS Piedmont, the pride of the East Coast. While some airlines aimed for the skies, others kept their roots firmly planted on the ground. Enter Piedmont Airlines, the pride of the East Coast. This plucky carrier started small but dreamed big, growing from a regional airline to a major player in American aviation. Picture this. It's the 1960s, and Piedmont's propeller planes are hopping between small southern towns like a frog on a lily pad. But those little hops were just the beginning. Piedmont soon spread its wings across the southeastern United States, becoming as much a part of Southern culture as sweet tea and college football. They even painted their planes in a snazzy red, white, and blue color scheme. Talk about flying the flag. By the 1980s, Piedmont was soaring high, expanding to major cities, and even dipping its toes into international waters. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. In 1989, Piedmont merged with US Air, leaving behind a legacy as sweet as peach cobbler. Allegheny Airlines, the seeds of US Airways. While some airlines aimed to paint the skies with vibrant colors, others took a more subtle approach to leaving their mark. Enter Allegheny Airlines, the quiet achiever that planted the seeds for a major aviation player. Ever wonder how a small regional carrier became a household name? Well, buckle up, couldn't resist, for a tale of transformation. Allegheny started as a humble mail carrier in 1939, but soon realized passengers were more interesting cargo than letters. By 1953, they ditched the mailbags and rebranded as Allegheny Airlines. Talk about an identity crisis. But this was just the beginning of their evolution. As the decades rolled by, Allegheny grew like a weed, gobbling up smaller airlines and expanding its network. In 1979, they decided Allegheny sounded too regional and rebranded as US Air. Apparently, someone thought adding air to US was the height of creativity. But hey, it worked. US Air eventually became US Airways, which later merged with American Airlines. Talk about a corporate family tree. Republic Airlines, a merger of regional giants. While some airlines were rebranding, others were busy merging. Enter Republic Airlines, the result of not one, not two, but 3 regional carriers joining forces. It's like the Avengers of the airline world, but with less spandex and more baggage claim issues. Republic Airlines formed in 1979 when North Central Airlines and Southern Airways decided 2 heads were better than one. But why stop there? In 1980, they gobbled up Hughes Air West too. Talk about an identity crisis. Republic's expansion wasn't all smooth sailing. They struggled with losses and service cuts. To boost morale, they introduced a human version of their mascot, Herman the Duck, because nothing says we're a serious airline like a guy in a duck costume, right? Despite their best efforts, Republic couldn't fly solo forever. In 1986, Northwest Orient Airlines swooped in and bought Republic for a cool $884 million. And just like that, Republic became part of aviation history. Ozark Airlines, the heart of Midwest aviation. While some airlines aimed for international glamour, others found their niche closer to home. Enter Ozark Airlines, the beating heart of Midwest aviation. Ever wonder how folks in places like Sioux City and Peoria got around back in the day? Well, Ozark had them covered. This plucky carrier started small in 1950 with just a handful of routes out of St. Louis. But like a determined Midwest farmer, Ozark kept plowing ahead. By the 1960s, they were buzzing all over the region in their trusty DC-3S. Talk about an upgrade from the old horse and buggy. Ozark wasn't just about getting people from A to B. They had style too. Their planes sported 3 swallows on the tail, symbolizing on-time flights. I guess punctuality never goes out of fashion, even if bell-bottom jeans do. But as they say in the Midwest, all good things must come to an end. In 1986, TWA swooped in and bought Ozark for a cool $242 million. And just like that, the little airline that couldn't anymore. Frontier Airlines, Rocky Mountain High Flyer. While some airlines aimed for bright colors and international glamour, others found their calling in serving America's heartland. Enter Frontier Airlines, the Rocky Mountain High Flyer. This plucky carrier started small in 1946, focusing on the Four Corners region. But like a determined mountain climber, Frontier kept ascending to new heights. By 1950, Frontier was soaring across 40 cities with a fleet of trusty Douglas DC-3S. Talk about covering ground. They weren't content with just prop planes, though. In 1964, Frontier became the first to fly the Convair 580, a turboprop that probably made other airlines green with envy. But Frontier's ambitions were as big as the Rockies themselves. They merged with Central Airlines in 1967, expanding their reach to a whopping 100 airports. That's more destinations than you can shake a ski pole at. Unfortunately, like many airlines of its time, Frontier hit some turbulence in the 1980s. They tried to stay afloat by cutting costs, but eventually, the Rocky Mountain High Flyer had to come in for a final landing. People Express, the low-cost pioneer. While Frontier was soaring over the Rockies, another airline was revolutionizing air travel with a completely different approach. Enter People Express, the airline that made flying as simple as hopping on a bus. Imagine boarding a plane and paying for your ticket in cash, right there on board. Sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what People Express did. Founded by a group of aviation rebels who left Texas International, People Express introduced a no-frills model that would make even your Uncle Scrooge smile. They charged for everything. Checked bags, sodas, even their fancy snack pack. But hey, at least the fares were cheap. People Express grew faster than a teenager hitting a growth spurt, even buying out Frontier Airlines. But as they say, the higher you fly, the harder you fall. The airline's debt skyrocketed, and they eventually sold out to Continental. But their legacy lives on in every budget airline that makes you pay for a bag of peanuts. Air California, the Golden State's own airline. While People Express was shaking up the industry with its no-frills approach, another airline was taking a different route. Quite literally. Air California, later known as AirCal, was all about giving the Golden State its very own wings. Imagine an airline that focused solely on California like a flying in-and-out burger. Air California took off in 1967, starting with a simple route from Orange County to San Francisco for just $14.85. That's less than a fancy avocado toast in San Francisco today. But Air California wasn't just about cheap fares. They were all about comfort, offering extra legroom and one-class service. It was like flying in the comfort of your living room, minus the ability to pause for bathroom breaks. As the years went by, Air California spread its wings beyond the state borders. By 1987, they were flying as far as Chicago and even made it to Canada. But like many great California dreams, it eventually came to an end when American Airlines acquired them. I guess you could say Air California's independent spirit got grounded. Air Florida, Sunshine State to international skies. While some airlines aimed for the stars, Air Florida set its sights on the sunshine. This plucky carrier started small in 1971, offering $12 flights between Miami, Orlando, and St. Petersburg. Talk about a bargain. But Air Florida wasn't content with just hopping around the Sunshine State. They had bigger plans, like taking on the world. Led by Ed Acker, a man with big dreams and even bigger planes, Air Florida expanded faster than a Florida sinkhole. They traded their humble turboprops for sleek Boeing jets and started flying to Europe. Suddenly, Floridians could jet off to Amsterdam or Paris without breaking a sweat, or their bank accounts. But like many Florida dreams, Air Florida's story had a stormy ending. Despite their attractive flight attendants and fancy food, financial troubles and a tragic accident in 1982 grounded them for good in 1984. Turns out, even sunshine can't keep an airline afloat forever. PSA, the airline with a smile. While Air Florida's sunshine dreams faded, another airline was painting smiles across the California skies. Remember Pacific Southwest Airlines? PSA wasn't just an airline, it was a flying party with wings. Picture this. It's the 1970s and you're strolling through a California airport. Suddenly you spot a plane with a big grin painted on its nose. That's PSA, the airline that took its slogan, "The world's friendliest airline," quite literally. PSA wasn't content with just painting smiles on planes. They filled their aircraft with flight attendants known as Californian beauties, wearing snappy dresses. It was like a fashion show at 30,000 feet. But PSA wasn't all style and no substance. They were pioneers, becoming the first intrastate airline to fly jets in 1965. Sadly, even the friendliest smile couldn't save PSA from the harsh realities of the airline industry. In 1988, US Air gobbled up PSA, erasing those iconic grins from the California skies forever. Texas International, small airline, big ideas. While some airlines aimed for flashy gimmicks, others focused on big ideas in small packages. Enter Texas International Airlines, the little carrier that could. This plucky airline may have started small, but it had some tricks up its sleeve that would change the industry forever. Ever wonder where those cheap fares and loyalty programs came from? Well, you can thank Texas International for that. Back in the 1970s, Texas International introduced something called peanut fares. These weren't snacks, folks. They were super cheap tickets that had everyone scrambling to book flights. It was like a Black Friday sale in the sky. But Texas International wasn't done innovating. In 1979, they created the first modern frequent flyer program. That's right. All those miles you've been hoarding, you can trace them back to this little airline from the Lone Star State. Flying Tigers, from military to civilian cargo. While Texas International was shaking up the industry with cheap fares, another airline was busy moving cargo instead of passengers. Ever heard of Flying Tigers? No, it's not a circus act. It was America's first all-freight scheduled airline. These cats had some serious claws in the cargo world. Flying Tigers got its start as a military contractor, named after the famous World War II fighting unit. But in 1949, they decided hauling boxes was more fun than bombs. Talk about a career change. By the 1980s, these Tigers were roaring. They became the world's largest cargo carrier, serving nearly 60 cities on 6 continents. That's a lot of catnip. But even the mightiest Tigers can't outrun change. In 1988, Federal Express pounced, buying Flying Tigers and ending one of the coolest names in airline history. I guess you could say these Tigers got domesticated. America West Airlines, the desert upstart. While some airlines were soaring across continents, others found their niche in unexpected places. Enter America West Airlines, the plucky upstart that turned the Arizona desert into an aviation oasis. Founded in 1981, this carrier didn't waste time dreaming small. They quickly expanded from short hops around Phoenix to coast flights, proving that what happens in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas. Speaking of Sin City, America West's night hub in Las Vegas was a gamble that paid off. Imagine planes swooping in and out at 3 a.m. like nocturnal creatures. It was perfect for night owls and early birds alike. But America West wasn't content with just domestic routes. They even tried their luck with a flight to Japan, using a 747 that was probably more used to seeing desert than sushi. In 2005, America West merged with U.S. Airways, ending its independent run. But their cactus call sign lived on, a prickly reminder of their desert roots. Midway Airlines, Chicago's hometown carrier. While some airlines aimed for the skies, others found their niche closer to home. Enter Midway Airlines, Chicago's very own hometown carrier. This plucky airline had not one, but 2 shots at aviation greatness. Imagine an airline so nice they tried it twice. Midway Airlines first took off in 1979, promising a more pleasant experience from Chicago's less crowded Midway Airport. They were like the cool cousin who knew all the shortcuts around town. By the late 80s, Midway had become the nation's 12th largest airline. Not too shabby for the new kid on the block. But even hometown heroes can hit turbulence. High fuel prices and the Gulf War grounded Midway in 1991. But wait, there's more. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, or should we say a plane taking off from the runway? Midway Airlines 2.0 emerged in 1993. This time they set up shop in Raleigh-Durham. Unfortunately, the September 11th attacks dealt the final blow, and Midway closed its doors for good in 2003. Midwest Express, first class for everyone. While some airlines raced to the bottom with budget fares, one dared to ask, what if every passenger felt like a VIP? Enter Midwest Express, the airline that treated coach like first class. Born from Kimberly-Clark's corporate flight department in 1984, this unique carrier had a simple philosophy: make flying luxurious for everyone. Picture this. You board a plane, and instead of cramped rows, you find spacious 2x2 seating. No dreaded middle seat. But the real magic happened when meal service began. Forget mystery meat and soggy sandwiches. Midwest Express served hot restaurant-quality meals on china plates. And then came the piece de resistance: warm, gooey chocolate chip cookies baked right on board. It's no wonder their slogan was the best care in the air. Sadly, even the sweetest cookies couldn't save Midwest Express from financial turbulence. In 2010, they merged with Frontier Airlines, ending an era of airborne luxury for the masses. And just like that, our journey through the skies of yesteryear comes to an end. But the legacy of these 23 airlines lives on in ways you might not expect. Remember those fancy meals on Midwest Express? Well, they paved the way for today's premium economy class. And People Express's no-frills approach? That's basically every budget airline now. These lost carriers weren't just relics of the past. They were pioneers shaping the future of air travel. From Pan Am's global reach to Braniff's bold designs, each airline left its mark. They taught us valuable lessons about innovation, customer service, and yes, even financial management. As we look to the skies today, we can see echoes of these bygone carriers in every aspect of modern air travel. So next time you're crammed in economy, dreaming of more legroom, remember, you're part of a long, colorful history of aviation. Now, if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. It helps our channel soar to new heights.